Hi, this is Jim of Shiloh Kahal, and as I was working on my last video, I realized there's maybe another opportunity to take a couple of the passages that are confusing to people, all associated with the Pesach or the Passover and the timing of it. So the two passages I think that are primarily driving this discussion related to the start of a day versus the start of and how you actually observe. Well, let me also just make this statement. I am trying to distinguish in this video. I'm going to try to distinguish in this video the start of the day conversation versus just how do you keep the festivals that we are commanded to keep. I will contend that there is no discussion about the start of the day. To use the passages we're getting ready to use as proof text for an evening to evening, it, it it's unnecessary. First of all, it's not there. You have to read into it. Um, and all of the commands that we read in Exodus 12:6 and 8 through 8, 12:6 and 12:18, and then Leviticus 23:6, all of the commands are all about how you keep the festival and when you keep the festival. It has nothing to do with the start of the day. It's not a proof text for the start of the day. All of it can be read within the context of start of the day calendar. So with that in mind, let me read the two passages and then build it out on the calendar, what I believe I'm seeing, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about what others are offering in exchange for that. So let me first start. I've got Exodus or Leviticus 23:6 up, but let me first go to Exodus 12:6 because this is the beginning. This is the first Passover. This is all what's happening when they are, just before the Passover actually occurs, where the angel of death passes through and kills the firstborn of Egypt. This is the very first observance of Passover. And earlier we saw that they were to get find a lamb, get a lamb, how to measure lamb according to household, etc. But then on the sixth, this is where we begin the command of the Passover. So that lamb that we obtained on the 10th of the first month, we're to keep it, and let me just read it here. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. And now we get detailed instructions of what we do now. On the 14th day, he's identified it as the 14th day. And to move to the 15th day, we would need a segue of some kind. We don't need it, but it would be helpful. So on the 14th day, then, they shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, and then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it between the evenings. Very important. They've kept it until the 14th, and they're going to kill it between the evenings. Now, they're not talking about eating it between the evenings. They're talking about killing it between the evenings. And when we get to Leviticus 23:6, this becomes an important distinction because as we get the detailed instructions here in Exodus 12:6, in the same evening after they've killed it, they are to take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts of the lintel of the houses where they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh on that night. Well, that's not definitive that they're eating it on when they say that. We know that after killing them between the lamb between the evenings, and then we get to that night after killing it, that same day, which we know is Pesach between the evenings, that night they are to eat the flesh. The question is whether or not that night is still the 14th or if it becomes the 15th. But all we have here is no command to change the day at all. All they're saying is that we're going to eat the flesh on that night after they've killed the lamb between the evenings on the 14th. Then we have some instructions. It's roasted in fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. So whatever this, when they eat that Passover, they are to eat it with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. So we've introduced this concept of an unleavened bread that many are commingling with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, as if this will be the first of the Feast of Unleavened Breads. But that's not what it's saying here. It's just not what it's saying. You don't have to read that in. What we are being commanded so far is that we're to eat the flesh that night, having killed them on the 14th. That night we're going to eat it with unleavened bread. That's all it's saying. And then verse 9, do not eat it raw. Now I'm going to skip some of these instructions because these are detailed instructions about how you eat it, what do you do. Now this is important. because on the 10th, once they start eating the meal, once it becomes night up here, that night, once it becomes night, which is commonly understood to be after evening, into the evening, and then, which is the sun going down, maybe through the twilight periods and then on into the night. That's the understanding of when we're to eat it. And then we're eating it over that night, but we're not to leave any of it until morning, which if you go to I'll just say that the morning is commonly understood to be the sunrise, but it also could be that twilight period of time that starts with the astronomical twilight, then the nautical twilight, then the civil twilight, just before the sun comes up. But sometime clearly before the sun rises, however we're going to define morning, clearly before the sun rises, we're not supposed to have any of that Passover left until morning. And anything that is left, we're going to burn with fire. Now, again, the question is, as we are eating it, and if we're not leaving it, are we still on the 14th when we're eating it and we can't leave it until the 15th, which is the morning? And is that, first of all, it's not stating that emphatically, but if you're running on a morning to morning, that would be the norm. And this is how you are to eat it. I shouldn't say the norm. That would be commonsensical, I guess I should say. And this is how you eat it. So I'm not going to go through, okay, so you eat it, I will. And this is how you eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Pesach, or Passover of Yahweh. And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night. So whatever the day is, which is the 14th, clearly we kill the lamb on the 14th between the evenings. Whatever that night is the night that he says he passes through, but the angel of death passes through. So if we're going sunrise to sunrise, then the passing through of this angel continues to happen. It happens on the 14th, which is all part of the whole Passover. He's going to pass over. And is he going to pass over on the 14th? Or is he going to pass over on the 15th? Because that's the argument here. I contend that night, when he says that night, he's talking about the night of the 14th still. And that is, which is still Passover. And that's the night that he actually does pass over the firstborn in the land of Israel, and goes through the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim and passes judgment on them. And the blood shall be a sign for you. And that's kind of what they're saying here. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I shall pass over you, and let the plague not come on you to destroy when I smite the land of Mitzrayim. I should have just read it, but just to say, basically he's telling them that night he's coming through. And according to Jubilees, he's actually sending an angel of death, which is Hasatan. It doesn't really matter. He takes credit for it, and he passes through, and he's going to smite all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim. And in that moment, I guess he's talking about smiting Israel too, except when he gets to their place, when he gets to them, and the blood shall be a sign for them on the houses where they are. And when he gets to them, and when he sees the blood, he shall pass over you, and let the plague not come on you to destroy when I smite the land of Mitzrayim. And this day shall become to you of remembrance, and you shall observe it as a festival to Yahweh throughout your generations. Observe it as a festival, an everlasting law. So what has happened? That we just saw him pass over, which is the whole purpose, the day of the whole observance, the whole festival is all about him passing over. That's what it is, all about that. So he has not transitioned. He just said on the 14th, in the first month, on the 14th, we're to kill the lamb, and that night we're to eat it with unleavened bread. And then we are to eat it in haste, with sandals on, all the kinds of things that go into what was happening to them. And then he comes through and passes through that night. And that whole day becomes this festival that he's talking about, the festival of Passover. So in the Passover is the killing of the Passover lamb, the eating of the Passover lamb or goat, the Pesach, and then the actual Passover or Pesach. That would be a natural read if you don't have the complications of somebody trying to introduce a sunset to sunset day. Then he goes on, and this is part of the confusion, because it goes on to say, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first day you cause leaven to cease from your houses, for whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that being shall be cut off. On the first day of what? This 7 days. First of all, I would suggest that we have a new thought here, because we just observed the Pesach. Now we know, and we'll see in Leviticus, that there is the festival of Matzah, which he'll refer to later, that begins, which is a 7-day celebration. So we know we're entering into a 7-day celebration. So I suggest we are now entering a different thought where we are entering in this 7-day celebration, where as they begin, let me just read, 7 days you shall eat, etc. And on the first day is a Kodesh gathering, and on the seventh day you have a Kodesh gathering. So we know on the first and seventh day of that week, that festival, we are not to work or to have a Sabbath. No work is to be done on them, only that which is eaten by every being, that alone is prepared by you. And you shall guard the matzah. So here's the name of this 7-day festival. We're to guard the matzah. And here's why. For on this same day I brought your divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim. Let's look at the purpose of the day, even the naming of the Pesach or the Passover. It's because he went through the land, and because he saw the blood over the lintel, and because of the sacrifice of the Pesach and the blood of that, when he saw it, he passed over. So the whole day is named, which goes on into the evening. The whole festival, the whole remembrance is all about him passing over. What is this 7-day remembrance of Matzah about? What are we commemorating here? He says, and you shall guard the Matzah, which is the festival of Matzah. It appears to be the festival of Matzah. For on this same day I brought your divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim. And you shall guard this day throughout your generations. Well, what is Matzah? It's the 15th. It's the day that he brought everybody out. So now we're commemorating something else. On the 14th, we commemorated the Passover. And on the 15th, we're commemorating the day that he brought their divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim, which is Egypt. And we're to guard this day throughout the generations, an everlasting law. So then we get in verse 18, we revisit it. It basically says, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, in the evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the evening. Now, many will conflate this and say that, okay, so we're to eat in the evening, we're to eat unleavened bread from the 14th until the 21st. And I agree. And it will be pointed out, that's 8 days. And I agree, it is 8 days. But in verse 18, I suggest to you that we have 2 festivals here. We have the festival of Passover, on which we eat unleavened bread on the 14th. And then we have the beginning of Matzah, which begins on the 15th and runs until the 21st day, which is 7 months. And when we get to verse 19, we are no longer talking about Passover. The day of Passover has come and gone. Now we're talking about the Feast of Matzah, which is a 7-day feast. For 7 days, no leaven is to be found in your houses. For if anyone eats what is leavened, that same being shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether sojourner or native of the land. Okay. Now, I have heard the teachings that argue that, okay, we've got a problem because, first of all, talking about Sean Griffin and people of his camp, they're talking about how Pesach, the literal day, Pesach, the 14th, is often conflated with the 15th and the festival of Matzah, so that they call the entire period of time, the actual day of Passover and the Feast of Word, they call it all the Passover. Because in that 8 days, I mean, it's all one celebration that brings them into the city, into Jerusalem, and they're to celebrate the full 8 days. It's an 8-day celebration, but it's composed of 2 separate commemorations, 2 separate festivals, Pesach and then the 7-day Feast of Matzah. I get that in the scriptures, in the Gospels, they often don't differentiate often. They just say, hey, we're going to celebrate the Passover, and then they talk about it as though they're talking about the whole week. And I get there's a conflation. But no matter what they're doing, that's no reason to actually say then that Passover and Pesach is literally the same festival as Matzah. Pesach is 1 day on the 14th. Matzah is a 7-day celebration, with the first day beginning as a Passover and the 7th day beginning as a Passover. That's what we are hearing here in these scriptures. When we get to the new writings and we see in the Gospels where they're conflating it, as Sean will argue, okay, But that doesn't undo this. And to suggest then that all of the Pesach, the two festivals together, need to be done within 7 days is reading more in than should be read. It's not necessary. And to get it done, they start trying to move the festival of Matzah into that evening of the, at the end of the day on the 14th. And by the time they're eating that Passover meal, they're now also calling it the first meal of the festival of Matzah. They don't have instruction for that. We don't have instruction for that. That is rationalizing once you have commingled. Once you have commingled the two things, it's rationalizing to make the evening to evening work. Because once you get to the evening, if you've got an evening to evening start of the day, you're in the 15th. So that Passover meal that we've understood to be a Passover meal is actually the first meal of Matzah. Well, what is it? Is it Passover meal or the first feast of meal of unleavened bread during Passover, or is it both? I think Sean Griffin and many would argue that it's both. It's Passover meal. It is the first day of Matzah, and therefore it's both. But I'm saying that the scripture says that's not how Exodus 12, 6 through 18 is showing us. We have clearly a 14th that runs at the beginning, between the evenings for sure, and into that night when the Passover actually begins. And then we have a 7-day Feast of Matzah, which is the day, as we said here, it's the day that he led them out of the land of Egypt or Mitzrayim. And it's a brand new commemoration. And in that commemoration, we also eat unleavened bread. So we do have 8 straight days of eating unleavened bread, beginning at Passover in the evening, because that's when we eat the Passover. So beginning that evening and running it on through to the evening of the 21st. When do why does it end at the evening of the 21st? Does that mean in the night you could eat leavened bread? I suppose you could. Technically, maybe, because that's what it just says. I don't think I'm eisegeting here. I'm exegeting. If the 21st day, which would be the last day of the Feast of Matzah, no matter how we look at it, is in the evening, it's just over. The eating of the unleavened. Now, it's not saying, because many will say that when it says that we are to stop eating unleavened bread, or that we are no longer required to eat unleavened bread until the 21st day, when it says that in the 21st day in the evening, now they're reading in and eisegeting that this is speaking about the day. This is what they're offering as an evidence that the day begins in the evening because of this passage, along with some of the other passages. But that's not what it's saying. It's not saying anything about the day beginning and evening. Because when you get to the 21st day of the Feast of Matzah, and we are told that that we can stop eating unleavened bread in the evening, that's the last time that we eat unleavened bread, doesn't mean that the day ended. It just means that we stop eating unleavened bread in the evening of the 21st day, which I will submit to you is also, okay. I'm going to go and I'm going to point this all out on the calendar in just a second. But let me go to Leviticus, because there is a bit of confusion that takes place here. Because when we get to Leviticus 23 and we get to verse 5, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evenings is the Pesach. I suppose there's a chance, because that's as much definition as we get. Now, we get more description of what takes place on this 14th day that we have that evening. We're going to be eating the Passover and staying in our home, having put the blood over it. Okay, so this is actually not that same night. So we're not putting the blood over. But we're to eat that Passover in that evening, that night. I mean, that's the instruction of Exodus 6. The fact that it says here in Leviticus that the Pesach is from evening to evening, I suppose that could potentially lend to confusion, because if you understand evening to be twilight to twilight, meaning from the morning hours to the evening, to the start of the evening, then that could be confusing, because you think but then that's also not a 24-hour festival. It would only be a 12-hour festival between two evenings, and we know the Passover. Well, we understand the Pesach or the Passover to be a 24-hour day, the full 14th day, whether it starts in the evening at the end of the 13th day, or it starts in the morning on that next sunrise. Okay, so that might be a little bit, I get it, but here's a clear separation that the festival of Matzah, well, here, let me just read, and on the 15th day of this month is to be the festival of Matzah to Yahweh. 7 days you eat unleavened bread. So we know that the Pesach is all about the killing of the lamb, killing of the Pesach, which could also be a goat, and then the actual passing over those who are covered in the blood. We know that that's what Passover is all about. The festival of Matzah is all about him leading them out of the land, which begins on the 15th. And that festival runs 7 days. And in that 7 days, we eat unleavened bread. Now, they don't mention unleavened bread up here, but we know that on the 14th day, in the evening, at night, according to Exodus, the Exodus passages in 12, we're to eat, the 14th day, we're to eat that Pesach into the night, that night. Okay. And then here they're just affirming again that on the first day you have a Kodesh gathering, you do no servile work, and you bring an offering by fire. And on the 7th day is a Kodesh gathering, you do no servile work. Okay, let's go play this out. I'm just going to take what I am saying I just read in the 2. So if we go back to Exodus 12:6, we're told to keep it until the 14th, and then all the assembly of the congregation shall kill it between the evenings. What does that mean? It means we've been keeping it, and here on the 14th, once the twilight or the evening begins, which would be morning, I think most of us would, the sunrise, most of us understand that to be, that is the first evening of the 2, which followed by the second evening, which is the daytime. It's the daylight period of time, which is when we are supposed to kill the Passover, which is evident in the scriptures, in 12:6 here. So we're to kill it between the evenings. Then we're to take some of the blood and put it on 2 doorposts on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. So where we're going to eat it, we're supposed to spread blood. And then they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. So to go back to our calendar, we've killed the Pesach and begun preparing it, because when evening and that night comes, we begin to eat the Passover lamb. On the 14th, in the evening, that night, we're eating the Passover lamb, and when we do, we eat it with unleavened bread. That is what I'm reading in this passage. And they go on to say, don't eat it raw, and don't leave any of it until morning. What remains of it until morning, you are to burn with fire. So that means that we can eat it through the first, into the evening, starting in the evening. That's what we understand. Starting in the evening, once the sun has gone down, into the first part of the night and into the second part of the night. But anything that remains as we're approaching the next day, the sunlight, the next day, the morning, is to be destroyed by fire. That's all we're reading so far. We haven't read nothing about a transfer of the day. Then they find how we're to eat it in haste. And then he describes how he's going to pass through the land. So he's basically saying, while you're eating, you've got the blood over the doorpost. While you're eating, I am going to pass through the land and kill all that are not covered in the blood. So this is all happening on the same 14th day, the Passover, at night. He's passing over at night, and that's the reason we call it the Passover. And that's all that we're seeing described here. Pass through the land, and when he sees the blood, he's going to pass over them. And then we are to remember, this day shall become to you a remembrance. And we're to observe it as a festival to Yahweh throughout the generations. Observe it as a festival. So, if we were to take, and let me just go back, if we were to take Leviticus 26, where it says on the 14th day we're to keep it between the evenings, that would be suggestive that this 14th day, which we are to keep according to the Exodus 6, as our festival, this day is what? The 14th. He's identified it as the 14th. And Leviticus is also mentioning the 15th. But Exodus describes the details of what takes place on the 14th, where Leviticus doesn't. But just to affirm that it's this day, that is to be a remembrance to us. So what day? This day, the 14th, the entire thing. We get up and we kill the lamb, we prepare the lamb, we eat the lamb after we spread the blood over and cover ourselves in the blood of the peace saw. And then that night we eat it while the angel of death is going through and passing over us because he sees the blood. So all night long, so this entire day is the festival. It's the remembrance. This is what's taken place. And then we move on to the next day. Once the 14th ends, we have 7 days where we shall eat unleavened bread. So beginning this day, which begins at sunrise, once we've killed destroyed all the uneaten portions of the peace saw, and this day has ended, and we've destroyed it before the next day. That's what we're doing. We're destroying the peace saw before the next day because we've got to, they had to leave. I shouldn't say because. I don't know why exactly. But the next day they're leaving. And when we get back to the Yah scriptures here, for 7 days we're to eat unleavened bread, and on the first day, we're supposed to get rid of all the leaven. So does that mean we're supposed to on the 14th get rid of the leaven? I guess that in practice, maybe we should start getting the leaven out before the day begins, but that's really not what it says. And it says on the first day we're to remove all the leaven from our house. So that's the day we go and collect it all up by appearances in the scripture. And then whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that being is cut off. On the first day we have a Kodesh gathering. So here is on the first day we have a Sabbath here on this day. It's a Kodesh gathering. And where no work is done on it all, and only that which is eaten. So we'll do the work to eat that day, and what is prepared for you. And you shall guard this matzah, for on the same day I brought your divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim. You shall guard this day. So the day we are guarding is this day, and then the festival. So this is the day we're guarding, the 15th, which is the day he brought them out of the land, and begins the first of the 7 days of eating unleavened bread. I want to say, and the reason, of course, again, is because we're bringing out of the land of Mitzrayim or Egypt. Regard this day an everlasting law. In the first, so then just to reiterate again, on the first day of the month in the evening you shall eat unleavened bread. So here, 14th, on the 14th, forgive me, how does that read? In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, in the evening you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day. So that passage 12:18 says we are to eat in the evening on the 14th unleavened bread, not to be commingled with the festival of Matzah, which is the first day of unleavened bread. But let me also describe, if this evening is just the passing of day into night, it's the same day, it's the 14th. And then we come back here, and for 7 days no leavened bread is to be found in all your dwellings. All right, so somewhere in here I thought it said the 7th day is also don't work. But that's what's happening. So we have all day long one festival, Passover, that included everything I've been including. And then beginning on the 15th, when the sun comes up, we are to get rid of the leavened bread, get rid of the leaven in our home, and begin eating unleavened bread because that's the day he gathered them out of the land. So we're commemorating the day he brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim or Egypt after the Passover. And then we have 7 days of eating unleavened bread. 7 days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the last day of this festival of Matzah is also a Shabbat. Now, the teaching here is that we are to eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month in the evening. So when we get to evening here, we're done needing to eat unleavened bread. And you can take from that, many are taking that as evidence that we have therefore just changed the day, but it won't work, and I'm getting ready to explain that. So basically the command is that we eat the 7 days. So we're going to eat, we're going to eat from the 14th to the 21st, which is 8 days. But then it goes on to say from 7 days. So it says 8 days. I mean, it is 8 days from the 14th until the 21st. But then we're talking about the Feast of Matzah, where we eat it for 7 days, which is the actual festival of Matzah. Okay. All right. So then that's how it works in without reading. I don't think I read the first thing into either one of those passages. The only difficulty that I would have at all in either of those passages is that it says on the 21st day we eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month in the evening. So that is one of the potential problems that we would have with this passage concerning the start of the day, which they aren't talking about the start of the day here, but it's used in the argument and the discussion that we are talking about the 21st day. And then we go to Leviticus 23:6 is the other passage that potentially has, um, you know, would be used. It's used as evidence for an evening to evening because it's not quite clear because the Pesach is more than just between the evenings. The Pesach runs the whole day. Because if it was just the evening to evening, what about the Pesach that happens that night, the actual passing over? Okay, so those are the two problems. But let's carry this out. If we have an evening to evening, and the arguments I've had is that the evening begins either when the sun is coming down and touches the horizon, and maybe even runs during that period of time as it's going below the horizon, a 3 to 5 minute time, which I struggle with that because that is eating into our 24-hour period. And you have a period of time where you don't know what day you're in. And then it goes down and it disappears below the horizon, and uh, and and maybe that period of time is the transfer of day, or so. But to say some either are taking it as when the sun touches the horizon, or they're taking it when the sun is completely below the horizon, or they're taking that little period of time when it's going down and it's touched and now we're going through it until it disappears, which would be a transition process, a moment of time. But any way you look at it, at roughly the time of the sun going down is the transfer of days in this understanding. So I don't really need to keep parsing whether it's the sun touching, any of those three options, touching, going all the way down, or that period of time in between, because basically once the sun is down, we've transferred days. So let's play this out. If that's what happens and that's when the day transfers, then they're going along. All of Israel's going along on the 13th day, and then the sun, we have the evening and the sun goes down. And now we've entered the 14th day. So what is this? This is, let me see if I can get a marker. Okay, so I needed to get a marker out because this gets complicated. And I'll just take opportunity to make this statement right now that, I don't think there's anything complicated about what I just shared when you're going sunrise to sunrise and you are coming up with, what you're supposed to do on the full 14th day and into the night and this whole week. But if we're going to go evening to evening, it gets complicated. So I pulled out a pencil so that I can begin to mark here. So we're going through, Israel would be going through the 13th day, and then we have the sundown. Suddenly right here, we now have the 14th. So we've just entered the 14th day. So when is the evening period of time? First of all, we need to define evening. Is evening only that moment in time when we're transferring? So we have no evening, transfer of time, no evening. So we go straight from day to a moment in time for an evening, and then night after that. So evening is just like that. Or as we colloquially understand terms like, and as I've shared in other videos, we colloquially understand evening. Evening is really a period of time. It's not a moment in time. It's a period of time. It needs to be a moment of time if you're going to measure the day from this time, from evening to evening. It needs to be a period of time. But it doesn't need to be a period of time in a sunrise to sunrise. And in what I'm saying, it doesn't need to be a moment in time if you're going sunrise to sunrise. It literally can be that period of time. If you remember, Wikipedia colloquially defines the evening as basically from the afternoon to bedtime, and maybe on into a period of time while the sun's still up for a little bit. We get into the evening. And here in the United States, we understand the evening to kind of be that, it's after the day of work, as we're waning and the sun is getting ready to go down, and then the sun does go down, and then we have this period of time where we have that twilight period of civil, then nautical, then astronomical twilight, and then night. So that whole time of evening into the passing of the last light at the astronomical light, and we get dusk, is literally the whole evening process, and that's what we understand it to be, colloquially. But if we're going to go morning to morning, we need it to be a moment in time, because we've got to define when the day ends. We can't say that, well, the day starts to end at 4:30 as the sun's waning, and then the sun touches the horizon and begins to go down, and then we start getting into twilight. We can't have this whole process being the transfer of the day. We would have this, what would it be? A 2 hour or hour period of time? A whole hour is the transfer of the day? How confusing would that be? And it makes no sense. And if you don't find it anywhere in scripture, it's really just baked in. It comes, in my opinion, it comes from the Jewish traditions that we have inherited from those who took over for the Yehudim, took over the legitimate priesthood of the sons of Aaron, and replaced the sons of Aaron in 175 BC with, first of all, the Hellenistic priests, and then all of the Hasmonean priests, which were the Maccabees, and during which time the Pharisees and the Sadducees gained their control and took over and began incorporating their errant doctrine that Yahushua and John the Baptizer were so adamant about, and that Paul even began to argue about, who once belonged to their sect and then ultimately argued against their additional corrupting doctrines of men. And I think that's where we're getting this, because evening to evening comes, if I understand it correctly, and I'm repeating here, but it's my understanding that the Babylonian calendar used an evening to evening. So maybe that's where they're getting it from. But whatever it is, it seems to be coming from them, because when you look at the sons of Aaron, according to the writings of the Dead Sea Scrolls, they're using the Enochian calendar, and they're using what we've now come to call the Zadok calendar. They're using just a different calendar and method than what current Judaism uses, which gets their writings and their traditions from the Pharisees. Okay, so they've just started. Let's go back to this. So at the end of the day on the 13th, we begin the 14th. So when is the evening of the 14th? Is the evening of the 14th the first thing that happens? If you go to their argument, well, a day is an evening and then a morning, back to Genesis, they think the evening happens first. So the evening is the first part of the day. So by that definition, the evening of the 14th is happening at the end of this daylight period of time of the 13th. So when all the passages that talks about evening and night on the 14th is happening starting here in the evening and through the night until the sun comes up over here on this day. And when we get to, let me see if I can get back to Exodus 6, is that what we think we're reading here? We should keep till the 14th and kill it between the evenings, and then we shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. Nothing about changing the days there. Okay, but that night that we are eating would necessarily, because it's clear, forgive me, let me go back. Because when we talk about this night and eating with unleavened bread, it must be the 15th, according to your, that's what you believe, that it's evening to evening, then it must be the 15th by the time you're eating this flesh that night. So let's go back to that. So the evening of the 14th and the night of the 14th happens first. Then we have the morning of the 14th coming last. We have the morning of the 14th. And then we have the daytime period of the 14th coming last. Now, I've heard the arguments, and if you will go through some of my other videos, you'll see that some are saying, well, okay, but at evening is when the sun touches the horizon. Okay, all right. But all that means to you is that as soon as that sun touches the horizon, we've started the 15th. That's all it means. It doesn't change any of these problems. It doesn't, because here we've gone to the 15th. Sun goes down, and we're now on the 15th. And so this night that we're eating is the 15th. So we've lost all the references to eating on the 14th in the evening would be pointing us to here, and we've gone past that period of time in your understanding. And by the time we get to evening here on this day, after we've killed the lamb, we are eating on the 15th, which we don't find anywhere. We don't find anywhere. We're actually told to eat on the 14th of that night. And we do have a reference. Let me see if I can find it real quick. So here we are back at Exodus 12:18. And it's very clear. In the first, on the 14th day of the month, in the evening. So we know that whatever evening, in the evening, ba'arev, in the evening, on the 14th day. So whatever evening you're going to select, it has to be the 14th day. So if you're going evening to evening, what is that? That's here. Here's your evening of the 14th. Whether it's when the disk hits the horizon, as some are arguing, the sun goes down, or that period of time in between, it's happened over here. And everything associated with twilight and night is happening first over here. So when we get to the end of this day, it's the 15th. And then how do we have, in the evening of the 14th, are we eating that unleavened bread? Because if you take this, if you work this out, you're eating that first meal that we're commanded to in 12:18, Exodus 12:18. This unleavened bread that we're eating is taking place in the evening on the 14th. So they're basically saying that we begin eating unleavened bread over here at this point in time. That's what they're saying. And then they kill the Passover lamb, and then, okay, so let's just walk this through. Evening to evening. So we begin the 14th, we get the evening. According to Exodus 6, we have to eat the unleavened bread here. But I don't think anybody's doing that. But that's when unleavened bread, or that Exodus 12:18 says we're supposed to be eating unleavened bread. But according to the evening to evening, we've begun the 14th day, and we're running through the 14th day. We've killed the lamb on the 14th day, but the sun touches the horizon or goes down or whatever, and we get a transfer of day into the 15th. So by the time we're eating this Passover meal, we're on the 15th, and we're violating Exodus 12:18, but we're on the 15th here. But it works if you conflate, because immediately, if we've gone to the 15th, what have you also just done? You have started the festival of Matzah, the first day of unleavened bread, and the Shabbat. So when the sun goes down, you got to have if that's what you're doing, you begin your Shabbat in the evening on the 14th, and you begin eating unleavened bread, and you begin your festival of Matzah for 7 days, beginning here. And then I won't keep drawing these lines through here, but you get it from the 15th to the end of the day here. Well, I will. Here's the 16th. But then we have the 17th, the beginning of the 17th. And then we have the beginning of the 18th here. And then we have the beginning of the 19th here. And then we have the beginning of the 20th here. And then we have the beginning of the 21st. Okay. So to go back to our passage, we are to eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month in the evening. So we are done eating, because the evening comes first. We are done eating unleavened bread at the very beginning of this last day of the 21st, because evening comes first. So if the evening comes here and we are done, we don't have to keep eating unleavened bread. Then throughout this whole day of the celebration of the 21st day, we would not necessarily need to eat unleavened bread, because the evening of the 21st has come and gone first thing before the daylight hours of the 21st. So unleavened bread is done here, and we have all of this day of the 21st that we are going to ride until the 22nd begins here. And at which time we could be eating unleavened bread. And then also we would be having, according to this understanding, we begin our Shabbat here in the evening on the 20th and carry it through to the evening here. But we don't really have to be eating unleavened bread on this last day of unleavened bread. Okay, so just to finish, because the only two potential, as I will repeat here, the only two potential things that are suggestive that we have an evening to evening day is this 12:18, where it says we stop eating in the month on the 21st day of the month in the evening. But let's go back and revisit this. If we have a daylight to daylight, that means the day comes up here, and the command to eat unleavened bread ends once the sun has gone down and we enter the twilight periods over here, and it's over. The need to eat unleavened bread, which is still on the 21st day, is over according to 12:18. That's it. has nothing to do with the start of the day. But if you think that that it is evidence of the start of the day, then you have started the evening over here first, because that is your understanding. That's everybody's understanding of the evening. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've got a misunderstanding. I've never had anybody. I don't think I'm misunderstanding because I've heard it so many times now. I'd have to hear a new explanation that will shock me with new information, which I'm open to, or even the same information that suddenly hits me different. I guess I'm open to trying to, if it's really evening to evening, I'm open to whatever I need to do to adjust my thoughts to get to there. But it's just not making sense. So that passage does not, while it maybe is quick and easy to say, why would they say evening if that's not the mark of the day? And why are they saying evening as though now that you need it to be the end of the day on the 21st day, because you need to go through the first day eating unleavened bread to observe the seventh day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you need it to be the end of the day on the 21st. But really, technically, you also need the evening to be the first part of the 21st, because that's how the evening to evening works. So it's not congruent. It's impossible logic I don't see how it could be anything but impossible logic. And if we take that same thing back to the other potential problem passage, in the first of the month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evenings. Okay, if that's evidence of what the Pesach is, that we observe Pesach from evening to evening, well, what does that mean? We've always understood that to mean, well, it could mean if you're observing, what are the potential things of evening to evening? One evening or one twilight starts here as the sun goes down. And if you're going evening to evening, that's the first of your evenings of the 14th day. The first of your evenings is the one that moves you into night. Well, I don't think anybody thinks that if we start with that evening or that twilight period, that we're supposed to kill the lamb that night before the next twilight or next evening of the morning. I don't know of anybody killing the lamb overnight at the end of the day on the 13th. Once the sun goes down, we kill the lamb, and before the sun comes up, and we have the next evening. Nobody doing that. So all of us understand that on the 14th, we have this first twilight, this first evening of the morning, and then we have the second evening of the day here, another evening after these daylight hours that we understand to be the time when we kill the Passover. But whether you go from this twilight to this twilight or this twilight to this twilight, you just have a 12-hour period of time. And is that really the entire understanding of Passover? Would you then say that the Passover, even if you were observing the 14th, and once you hit this 14th evening, are you observing the Passover yet? Or do you wait until the sun comes up and you observe Passover for 12 hours? Because that's the logic you're trying to apply here, as far as I can tell. So if you were to limit yourself that this between the evenings comma is the Pesach to Yahuwah, the entire Passover day, that's a problem. And then Leviticus 23:6 goes on to say, then we go on to the 15th day, which is what we're showing here. I think it more likely, and it seems commonsensical, that in Leviticus 23:5, when it's talking about between the evenings, we're actually talking about the period of time when we're to kill the Passover, when we're to kill the Pesach, according to Exodus 6, where we are to keep it in the 14th and then kill it between the evenings. That's what we understand it to be, and it seems much more likely that that's what Leviticus 26 is saying to us here, which just means that when they're talking about that you were going to have the Passover where you're going to kill the Passover between the evenings here, then you're going to eat the Pesach meal or the Passover meal that night, as Exodus describes for them. And that's not the only passage. I mean, I would need to go study it to be confident in exactly what I'm saying. But I know this is described in Jubilees, so there are other places that give us some data on this. And there's some confusion in the way it describes it in Jubilees, because Jubilees will say that we're to eat the Passover meal until from the evening of the 15th, we're to eat the Passover meal. And that would be, if everything I've ever heard, as I have said before, everything I've ever heard, if Jubilees is true scripture, which I believe it to be, And I think the problem here, well, I believe Jubilees to be scripture, you know, Moses written scripture, just like Genesis, just like Leviticus, just like Exodus. Now, it hasn't gone through all the vetting and all the things that the canon of 66 has, which also includes the vetting of the Pharisees. But I don't want to digress here. But it reads that we're to eat from the evening of the 15th. But I found other passages in other translations. Let me just say, I think there might be an error in the translation, which, I don't want to excuse it away. If it's there, it's there. If it's literally there, it's there. But I did go and try to find the Hebrew of Jubilees that we could find that they're basing it on, which is, I believe, the Septuagint. I think it's information that the Ethiopian scriptures are using, which are based upon Septuagint-based scriptures, which predates the Masoretic text and goes back to the Hebrew to Greek translations done, in the second, third, I guess it'd be the 3rd century BC. And I've seen other passages where where it says, unto you were to eat the Passover meal. Either one of the translations doesn't even mention the 15th. It just says you're to eat the Passover meal that night. Another one says you're to eat the Passover meal that night until the 15th, which would also make sense because you're eating the Passover meal here until the 15th, because at the 15th, when the 15th begins, you got to have all of the Passover meal destroyed by that time. So, okay, I'll leave it here. And, am I an expert in all of this? I'm not. I'm just applying reasoning. And if I am teaching error, forgive me. I just can't see it. I can't see evening to evening. I can't see evening to evening working in logic I could do the same thing. We could take the Passover, the crucifixion week, and do a very similar thing where I cannot make the evening to evening make the descriptions of the gospel accounts work in the time frame that we are led to believe it needs to work. But as soon as I go sunrise to sunrise, which is I did this year for the first time, as soon as I go sunrise to sunrise and apply it, it all takes its place. The 3 days in the grave, the rising on Shabbat, first thing in the morning on the weekly Shabbat, after the high Sabbath Shabbat, he rises. He's killed on this Shabbat, and he's 3 days and 3 nights in the grave, and then he rises first thing on this Shabbat. Once you apply that, the Passover, the crucifixion week, all takes its place. So if I'm wrong, if I'm telling you wrong, I'm sorry. And if you're not sure, if you're so convinced that it's evening to evening and you don't want to hear how that logic appears to break down, fine. Just continue to observe and do as you need to. And I don't know that it's a salvation issue. I don't really know. It's not for me to say. You're walking out your salvation with fear and trembling. But I only see logic being applicable, and I can only apply logic successfully to a sunrise to sunrise explanation. So that's why I'm offering it to people, so that I can get them maybe to think. If you take the time and the real effort to apply the logic of your position, and then also hear me and apply the logic of my position, and then you evaluate the two together and arrive at evening to evening being the superior explanation for what's going on, fine. Go for it. Do it. I applaud you. If you are making the legitimate effort and you're not going to put a dog in the race, meaning that you're going to have a bias that's going to make you choose one no matter what, no matter how ugly it is, you're going to choose it because that's your dog in the race and you need it to win for your reasons. And if that's you, then don't bother, because you've already presupposed what the answer needs to be. But if you really want to know when the day begins, evening or sunrise, sunset, sunrise, if you really want to know, I'm trying to lay out the two competing positions and how it would apply to the passages, some of these passages that are being offered as explanations, and then to the actual calendar and how it would work out. And if you will actually give time to these two approaches and the logic, and then arise at an objective answer, And if that objective answer is evening to evening, good. And if you come up with really good things, put it in the comments, and I'll try to investigate it. I want to know if you really, really have the logic worked out and can truly make the logic work and support evening to evening. I want to know. I want to hear working logic that says that. In the meantime, I haven't found any, I haven't heard any yet to this day. So when I apply logic, I can do it to the day to day. And that's what sunrise to sunrise. And that's what I do. And if you listen and truly with objectivity arrive at, after having evaluated both options faithfully and fairly, and if you still arrive at evening to evening, then please, you need to do according to your understanding, according to your faith, according to what Yahweh is leading you into. So I'm not trying to lead you. I know there are some who say that, those who teach don't want to be, you have to be careful because you are holding yourself out to greater testing, greater judgment. And I agree, but I'm not trying to hold myself as a teacher of law. I am just trying to discuss it and reason and offer on these points of contention, these points of uncertainty, the points where people are not agreeing. I'm trying to apply it and offer what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and what it's leading me to, and then you make your own decision. All right, thank you. It's just supposed to be a short video again, and here we are at an hour. I'm sorry, I don't seem to be able to get it done. Forgive me. May you be Baruch.